The Adult Ballet Studio is a podcast featuring conversations with the empowering voices of the adult ballet community, a world where passion has no limits and dreams can take flight. My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm an adult ballet dancer and your host. Welcome to the studio. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome back to the Adult Ballet Studio. I'm so excited for this episode to be talking with Cecelia Beam, faculty member for adult ballet and dance classes for people with Parkinson's at San Francisco Ballet. Cecelia is a former dancer herself, training at SAB in New York City and graduating from the high school ballet program at the University of North Carolina's School of the Arts. After dancing in Oakland, California, North Carolina, Indiana, and New York, Cecelia found teaching, which she says is her true passion in ballet. She earned a master's degree in ballet at Indiana University and has taught ballet at universities and private schools, including Mills College, Indiana University, and San Francisco Ballet School. She has a passion for teaching ballet for adults in particular, and in addition to that, she manages and is the lead teacher for San Francisco Ballet School's dance class for people with Parkinson's. She's coordinated San Francisco Ballet adult education programs for more than 15 years. How cool is it that San Francisco Ballet School offers these classes and that Cecelia is helping adults and dancers with Parkinson's and other cognitive disabilities thrive in a ballet setting and beyond? She shared some of the ways that she structures her classes to make them as inclusive as possible while remaining committed to true ballet technique and challenging her students. She also talked about the ways she's seen ballet change throughout her time studying it and where she hopes things are headed in the future. I can't wait for you to hear from her. Check out our interview. So much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited. I'm just so thrilled that adult ballet is getting this kind of advocacy and attention. So thank you.
Oh, of course. Well, yeah, me too. I mean, I'm part of the adult ballet community, and I was so excited. As I mentioned, I came across your work because I read an article in Elle magazine about some of the work you're doing. And I've seen, there was just an article in Dance magazine the other day about adult ballet. So it's exciting to see it sort of taking off everywhere. And
it's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, me too. And I love the work that you're doing. I know that you're based in San Francisco. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, could you
Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So much better than I'm here in New Jersey. It's raining and thunderstorming today, so I'm jealous. But for any of our listeners who aren't familiar with your work or what you do, I was wondering if you could just start off with a little bit of background about some of the work that you do at San Francisco Ballet School.
Well, right now I am teaching adult ballet. And I teach on Zoom. During the pandemic, we started teaching virtual classes. And it turns out I love teaching on Zoom. I meet people from all over, really, the world who are excited about ballet. So I'm teaching about 4 classes online every week. And then I go into the studio and I teach beginning and intermediate classes in the studio. And then I teach this dance class for people with Parkinson's. And most recently, I've been going out into the community to senior care facilities and teaching class to people with cognitive disabilities and also some active seniors, and just kind of seeing what the community out there would enjoy in terms of dance.
This is awesome. I love the work that you're doing. I'm really excited to be talking to you about it because I know you've had a long career teaching and before that, performing. And I love all the work that you're doing to improve accessibility for, seniors and especially those with Parkinson's, and other cognitive disabilities. So I guess I was just curious kind of to start off to talk about your history with San Francisco Ballet School. How did you originally get connected with teaching there? And can you talk about some of the programs that the school offers to try to make ballet more accessible to everybody?
Yeah, so, after my training and after dancing and after all that, I did become focused on teaching adult ballet. My initial goal was to teach in a university. And so I did get a master's degree in ballet from Indiana University because that was my goal. But as it turns out, it's not easy, actually, to find a place in the university setting to teach specifically ballet. It was also not easy to find those kinds of jobs in the Bay Area, where I was very dedicated and interested in staying. So I was limiting myself, I have to admit. Anyway, so as a result, I've always kind of been in the adult education world, but not always in ballet. So for a long time, I worked in healthcare, and I was working in residency programs, managing those. Always had like an admin job along with my teaching. And so I've taught in the community adult ballet, for many, many years. But when I got the opportunity to work at San Francisco Ballet as their HR manager, which I did for 20 years, I took that opportunity. And then when I retired from that, the adult programs were really starting to take hold. And so it was perfect timing for me to shift my work at the ballet into the ballet school. So that's how that happened. I think the community programs are fantastic at San Francisco Ballet. They've been very successful. They are huge. They serve so many children, youth, and families. And when I was always sitting in these meetings, I always heard children, youth, and families. And I always thought, well, where are the adults in this? Where are the elders in this? So when I had the opportunity to start working more fully in the ballet school, I kind of felt like I was an advocate for seniors specifically. And the ballet school has been very welcoming, supporting my interests and my training to be prepared to go out into the community and share our joy of dance with a much wider range, really, of our community by including adults and seniors.
And it sounds like there are a ton of great programs at San Francisco Ballet. And it's really cool that you were able to have such a long career as their HR manager, where I'm sure you were sort of, deeply involved in the intricacies of how the company works, and then to be able to transition into, becoming a teacher. And I know, as you mentioned, you're the lead teacher for San Francisco Ballet School's class for people with Parkinson's. So what's some of the background about that class in particular? How did you get involved with teaching that?
So around the time of my transition, the Kaiser Foundation gave the ballet school a little seed money. And at the time, Patrick Armand was the director of the ballet school. And his mother had Parkinson's and passed away with Parkinson's. And so he was very keen on offering this to the Parkinson's community. But I did not have the training, at the time to do it. I was a very skilled ballet teacher, but it was really a very different skill set you needed to do this kind of work. So I was able to go to Brooklyn to study with the Dance for PD folks there for several years. Got a lot of good training from them, came back and just started the program. It was a small cohort. Kaiser referred about 10 what they called at the time early onset patients. These were younger folks who were just experiencing the symptoms of Parkinson's. So we launched that program. I worked closely with some neurologists from Kaiser. They were very helpful in making me feel okay about making this a real ballet class, because you kind of think maybe you need to modify to such extent that you don't include a lot of ballet, but we are a ballet school, we are a ballet company. I really wanted there to be ballet. So one of the neurologists was a former ballet dancer, and she pointed out that one of the things that Parkinson's people really get from dance is when they're moving with great amplitude, big movement. And with ballet port de bras and cambray and all those kinds of movements, it's a nice pairing. So I was very much encouraged. And so we launched the program. It's been 7 years now. I have been teaching religiously 2 classes a week for these folks, even during the pandemic. And I've learned a ton. I've learned a lot. And it's been a great pleasure.
It sounds like a really fulfilling experience. And I love that you're incorporating, actual ballet. As you said, you're not making so many accommodations where it doesn't feel like a ballet class. Because I would imagine, just in my experience with adult ballet, that people want that. They want to come and learn actual ballet technique. Obviously, the San Francisco Ballet, as you mentioned, has a Parkinson's Foundation community grant that sort of allows the school to offer not only free weekly classes, but also social gatherings and tickets to performances and other things. And you spoke in another interview about how your classes are sort of an all-encompassing experience for your dancers. So I was wondering if you could talk about some of those resources and how that contributes to, a well-rounded education and experience with ballet.
I guess I would say, particularly for this population, just getting to the Civic Center is a bit of a chore. So we really try to include family, friends, advanced ballet students, a ton of volunteers. We really are creating community, because in this community, people feel very welcomed. They feel I don't know, excited about coming to class and doing the work, of course, but then staying after and chatting, learning more about ballet. We have educators come in and prepare the students before they go to a ballet. So there's just lots of little extras that I think the ballet school is putting forward to make sure these folks feel comfortable coming, safe, and included. And I think we're very proud of that. The ballet school ensures that we have pianists, for example. That's actually a bit of a challenge, and so that really adds to the experience. It's like everything. I'm very pleased that these classes continue to evolve by adding different activities. We just raised close to $18,000 for the Parkinson's Foundation through our team, Shake, Rattle, and Point. And we did a class demonstration down at Crissy Field in the rain. And it was a wonderful bonding experience, for all of us to go down there together and share what we do with a broader community. So there's these little opportunities that pop up. Sometimes I'm invited to a support group, and I'll bring a few of my students and we'll go down and we'll demonstrate, because you can talk about this, but you need to really show it. So I love when we're invited to different places to share what we do.
Congratulations on the amount of money you were able to raise. And Shake, Rattle, and Point is such a great name. I love that. And then I know you mentioned you have a live accompanist at every class, and that's such a huge benefit. I know it can definitely be a challenge for ballet schools. I take a class every week that has a live accompanist, and it makes such a huge difference in the class. So I was wondering if you could talk about any benefits you've seen, especially for older adults with Parkinson's, from having live music as, an element of their class.
I think it's the same for all my students, whether it's a ballet technique class, gentle ballet class for people who have dementia or people with Parkinson's. Having live music is everything. And it takes a special class pianist to be as diverse as I need them to be for these classes. It's particularly helpful to play familiar music for people, particularly with dementia or people who are kind of new or dealing with physical disabilities, because if this familiar music, I think it helps with the movement, because they know in their brain the tempo or the rhythm or something, and I think it helps translate into movement. So I tell you, it's just magical when you have a pianist, and I'm just so grateful that we do have a pianist, and we have extremely skilled pianists, because they have to be able to improvise, they have to be able to know some familiar tunes, and they need to know folk dance music, and it's just asking a lot from a ballet class pianist, but they do it, and they do it beautifully. Very grateful to them, for sure. I really see them as a partner in the studio, as I see my volunteers as well. They are very helpful to me to, again, ensure safety, but also just to create a bigger a movement experience, because you have more people moving in the studio who are experienced dancers, not just the teacher.
And I watch our accompanists sometimes in ballet class, and it always amazes me. I've tried to play the piano. It's such a hard instrument in itself. And then to be able to improvise and accompany a ballet class like that is beyond my level of comprehension. It definitely takes some talent. And then I know that you mentioned movement and some of the benefits that come from that with, the Parkinson's population. I know that you mentioned that one of the lessons you learned early on in sort of your training to work with this population of adults is that movement is sort of medicine for them. So do you have any anecdotes or stories to share from classes about how you've seen engaging with movement as a benefit to the adults that you teach?
I try not to enter class as a researcher, medical person, or as somebody who's measuring things too much. I'm looking more for the experience of either understanding something that they didn't understand before, and all of a sudden a light bulb goes off. For example, I'll use ballet terms. I'll say, like, we're going to do this en croix. What does en croix mean? And, you'll hear them say, it means, this pattern, and that they've learned that, and they are excited about learning ballet terminology or different steps. Or I see them more at ease going across the floor. Every day is different for these folks. Sometimes they have a good day, or sometimes their meds aren't quite right, or they're not feeling good. And it is a progressive disease. So sometimes, you see people who are struggling. So while I hope and know that through the research that's been done, that this is helpful, in the ballet class, I just really want people to dance. And I don't want them to feel like I am pairing them to how they danced before or last week or last month, or measuring them in any way, if that makes any sense. I just want them to have the beautiful experience of dancing. And I go into the class like that. So maybe I'll have some blinders on with that. I want every class to be a new experience.
And I think even beyond, adults with Parkinson's, for every dancer, that's such an important element to capture. Obviously in a professional setting, there are certain elements you need to measure, but I think, if every dancer can sort of harness that love of dance and the love of movement and just kind of enjoy each class as a new experience, that would really revolutionize the experience for them. So I think that's a great approach. And I know you mentioned earlier in our conversation that you try not to make too many accommodations in class because you want it to be about ballet and ballet technique. So maybe the answer to my next question is not very much, but I was just curious what types of accommodations or adaptations you might make to a ballet class so that everyone feels comfortable participating in the classes you teach to adults with Parkinson's, or, what are some considerations for teachers who might want to begin teaching this population of adults?
Yeah, well, I say, I really want to honor the traditions of ballet class. It is a very different class. We start seated. The first part of class is done in a chair. And the class is designed that if for any reason somebody wants to or needs to stay seated, they can. And we have my volunteers will translate the movement that I'm giving into chair movement. So those folks can participate throughout the entire class. So we start about 20 minutes. We do movement in the chair. Then we go to the ballet bar. Some of the accommodations is that we mostly work in first position. We don't work a lot in fifth position. We don't do a ton of, vigorous one-legged stuff. We're mostly on 2 feet for the most part. I do a lot of work around weight exchange, which, is so fundamental to dancing. You have to really understand where your weight is. And so we work a lot on that, facing the bar. We do a lot of, like I said, port de bras, combres, and work like that. In the center, we do some very traditional adagio, not probably like how you do in class, but something more simple, usually 2 feet. I get inspired by what the ballet company's doing on stage, and I will, take pieces from those ballets and modify them so that we can also experience some of those ballets in our class. And then I'm a big fan of folk dance. I usually end the class with a circle folk dance that's something that I've learned that I think is great for community building and also fun and is accessible for most people. And then we always do some sort of reverence at the end. So, there is some very similarities to a traditional ballet class, but there are quite a few modifications so that, people feel safe and, it's accessible to them.
It sounds like a wonderful class. And I know you mentioned earlier that you also like to reserve some time or space in your classes for students to, talk and share and just sort of support each other. So could you talk a little bit about how you make sure that there's space for that in your classes and about the importance of sort of supporting dancers' emotional and mental well-being as well as their physical health?
Yeah, so we have a meeting room right next door. So after class, before and after class, we actually gather everybody together. And that's where sometimes we have educational experiences. Sometimes we'll just have like a little informal, discussion. I'll try to facilitate something maybe somebody wanted to bring up and talk. Otherwise, it's just like a little support group meeting where people are getting together and getting to know each other and chatting. It's like making the space for it. I do think that a lot of these folks live alone. Some of them don't leave their apartment much until they're going to the doctors or doing some sort of medical appointment. So this is something I think very special for them, to be able to come and be with a community that, is completely understanding of what they're going through and, offering a little bit of support and fun. I always veer away from, when I can, getting involved in, medical conditions or all that. I just want to bring joy and fun and a wonderful dance experience. So that's been my goal in the before and after, is just talk to these people, get to know them. We have advanced ballet students and volunteers who know all their names, who chat with them and just do a really nice job of, getting to know them. And I think that is a great service.
And that fun element that you mentioned is so important. Sometimes it's important to just kind of leave all the stuff that you're dealing with at home at the door and just kind of enjoy having a ballet class and having that space for yourself. So I think that's a really important goal. And, I'm sure, any sort of adult ballet student appreciates that community because resources do get scarcer as you get older to engage with ballet. So I think that's great, the work that you're doing. And I want to kind of rewind a little bit because I wanted to talk a little bit about your own journey with ballet as well. So I was curious how you first discovered ballet and what was sort of your first introduction to it?
I imagine, my parents are gone, so I can't really confirm this, but I imagine I was the typical little girl, who saw ballet or heard about it or something and asked for ballet lessons. Luckily, my parents ultimately found a very good teacher. She was trained at the University of Utah through the Christensens, who is one of the founders of San Francisco Ballet. So it's nice to have that little American lineage to the company. She's a very good teacher. I got good training. I was fortunate at the time and I think they still do this, the Ford Foundation sends out ballet dancers from let's say, New York City Ballet, Jelana, Diana Adams came out, and they kind of go to little local ballet schools with good teachers, and then they invite those particular children to come and study. And that's when I went to SAB. And then I also went to North Carolina School of the Arts under the Ford Foundation scholarships. So I got very, very good training. I was very lucky to really get excellent training, which I've used as a teacher. Because my dancing career started so early. I danced in a regional ballet company, from the age of 13 till, I don't know, I guess it was 15. Even though it was 3 years, it was intense. We had so many performances. And by the time I went to North Carolina School of the Arts, I was kind of exhausted. I kind of felt like I'd already had a career.
I can imagine.
And so I was really, happy to dance in North Carolina. And I got a master's degree in Indiana University, so I could become a teacher. But I was really glad to be able to focus on teaching because I really felt that was my gift. I love dancing, but there's things about performing that are really rough. First of all, I did not enjoy working on pointe that much. My feet didn't love point shoes. It was always a struggle. I did it, but it was never really fun for me. And back then, they didn't have all the point shoes they have nowadays. There was one Capezio. That was it. And if your feet did not like Capezio shoes, you were out of luck. And then the other thing was, I suffered a little bit from stage fright. I really got pretty nervous on stage, particularly if I had to do something hard. And that's when you don't need it. So anyway, all those things pointed me to I love the art form. I want to stay in this, but how? And so I was really grateful I was able to figure out how. And that was through teaching adults specifically. I've never taught children. So I just really kind of found my way.
I love that you found your lane. And I can imagine, performing is so much pressure, especially performing on point. And to do that as you did at such a young age with a company where it's such an intense environment, I can imagine that would be really tough, but that's also a huge accomplishment. So congratulations on, your entire ballet career. I know you mentioned you studied at School of American Ballet in New York City, which is, iconic within the ballet industry. So I was curious what you could share about that experience or, something memorable, something that you learned or something that maybe might surprise others about training at SAB.
They're at the era that Danilova was still teaching and Stanley Williams and all these iconic dance teachers. So just, now all these years later, I've been involved with dance history and audience education, all this stuff. And so to be able to, look at the lineage like that is huge. So those memories are extremely valuable and important to me. I guess from a kind of a more lighthearted viewpoint, I grew up in California, it was the hippie era. We were hippies, and I show up at School of American Ballet and the girls are wearing fur coats and diamond earrings. And, I was just like, what? It was just such a different environment. Balanchine was alive. The girls would show up with their perfume and, it was all these kind of affectations that I was just not used to tell you the truth. So my experience there was short, but it was a very interesting one. I was really glad to have it. And I think if anybody has the opportunity, they should take it. It's changed so much. In my lifetime, ballet has changed so much that I'm sure other people have different experiences. But that's kind of my memories of it. It was pretty glamorous, I thought.
I'm sure it was a big culture shock, but it's cool to hear about that experience, especially to be able to study there while Balanchine was still alive and all of these amazing instructors and dancers were, still at the school. That's an incredible experience to have. And, as you mentioned, you sort of transitioned into teaching and discovered that that was sort of your true lane in ballet. And I love talking to people in the industry who found a career within ballet beyond performing. I was curious what advice you have for other dancers who want to engage with the art form, but maybe don't want to pursue it professionally as a performer, or maybe have done that and want to transition out of that into something else. How can they find, their path in ballet?
Gosh, I just look at my life because I think I actually used to give this counsel to adults who, when I was teaching in the mission way back, occasionally I'd run across a young person, maybe in their mid-20s, and they were discovering ballet and they just loved it and they wanted to make it their life. And they wanted to quit their jobs and they wanted to leave their families and they wanted to just completely immerse themselves in this life. And I was like, you could do both. I really think you could do both, And so I've kind of modeled my life after that. I always taught. I always kept it in my life. Sometimes it was small, sometimes it was big. But here I am now, after a long career in administration, both in hospitals and at the ballet. But I always taught and I always kept my fingers in it because then I was doing it, but I was doing it small. And now I'm doing it big. So you just never know what's going to present itself. So if you love it, stay somehow connected to it. And it doesn't have to be how you pay your rent. It doesn't have to be 9 to 5. It can be just small for a little bit. And then you're ready when an opportunity arises to make it bigger, if you want to make it bigger. Or let's say something happens, maybe you want to have a family, you want to make it smaller, you can make it smaller. But just keep it in your life because I think there's space for everybody. If you don't get so single-minded about it, which again, I think ballet has evolved where there's more space for people to think of it like this. But it took me a lot of soul searching to be able to be okay with that because it seemed like it was an all or nothing thing for a long time.
I love that the ballet industry has evolved to, be less one size fits all. That's something that I've experienced as well. When I was younger studying ballet, I thought I would love to have a career in this, but I know I'm not, studying at the level to be a professional dancer. And to have been able to sort of think about it more in a more open-minded way and be able to find, a different way to still engage with ballet. And I think that's great advice as well. Just sort of, keep it in your life, keep working at it, and then you'll be ready if an opportunity comes up. And I'm also curious, I know that you mentioned you've never taught kids, you've only ever taught adults. So what drew you to teaching that population in particular, and what do you like about those classes?
I just love my adult students. Well, first of all, they're so interesting and they're so motivated and they're my friends. Yeah. I really have enjoyed meeting so many wonderful, both online and in the studio. And in some ways online, there's some closeness because we stay after class and we chat and we get to know each other a little bit better. In the studio, sometimes people just kind of pack up and leave. But I've made a super effort to try to engage, with the adults and get to know them. And they're just lovely people. They're so hardworking. They are very motivated. They are open to learning, and I just love to see that. I come across people with all different kinds of interests and backgrounds, very accomplished people who all of a sudden have discovered ballet and want to learn more about it. And I'm just thrilled to be able to share what I've spent my life learning with somebody who's interested in it. So the match is perfect. I think with adults, you don't have to convince them that they should work hard. You don't have to rein them in and, get them to focus. Either they're going to focus or not. That's their decision. You don't have to worry quite so much about, them being unhappy about something. If they're unhappy about something, they'll let you know. It's just in some ways, I think, easier. But I don't know. Like I said, I've never taught children, so I speak with ignorance about that because I don't really know what that's all about. But I could just tell you that working with adults is just so much fun.
It sounds like it. And I know that you mentioned you've seen ballet sort of moving beyond its one-size-fits-all approach. And I heard you speaking in another interview about how adults find a lot of beauty in what they're doing because they're just doing it for themselves. They're not doing it to try to, get into a summer program or, pursue a career necessarily. And that kind of challenges that notion as well, that ballet is all or nothing. So can you talk about that a little bit more and how you've seen adult ballet kind of helping move the art form forward in that way?
I mean, my students are not only ballet students, but they're the patrons, they're parents of ballet students, they're donors, they're educators. There's just so much they bring to San Francisco Ballet as adult ballet students. So we really need to honor that and know that. I think I see them at performances. I want to make sure that what I'm delivering to the adult ballet students is a legitimate ballet class. People have to come to class on time. They have to have their hair up. They have to present themselves as a serious ballet student. I've coached people not to wear certain things to class, just, some of the basics. And I think by doing that, it really is an honest way to value an audience for ballet, so that they really understand, what goes into training. So what they're experiencing isn't that far from what the children are experiencing in the ballet school. And for example, I make all my adult students do preparation and finish for every combination, which I know they make the 8-year-olds do. And I have many students who say, I take other ballet classes and that's not really a thing. Why do we have to do that? I'm like, it is a thing. And they're proud that they know that that's important, but sometimes they'll say they're the only ones doing it. So I think kind of some of these traditions, some of them which are falling away, I have to say, but some of these traditions I think are important to pass on to our adult ballet students who then have a greater understanding of the art form, which can only serve, I think, the art form in general, serve them as ballet students. But it's just a small contribution. I'm just glad that a lot of ballet schools are realizing the value of having adults training in their schools.
I'm seeing so many more adult ballet classes popping up everywhere, and it makes me really happy. And I love that in the classes that I take. I love when the teacher is, sticking to some of the traditions and making sure that you come in, your hair's in a bun, you're dressed appropriately, you start and finish everything correctly, because that makes me feel like as a student, I'm being taken seriously. It's not just, we don't care about these adults, they're not pursuing it seriously. Yeah. And so I love that. And I think it's also a really interesting perspective when you're teaching adults that you're also building an audience and a group of donors for ballet, which can help, continue to make the art form thrive. I've never really thought about it that way, but that's also an important piece of it. So that's a good point. And I was curious, I know you've had a long career in ballet, as a performer, as a teacher, and a dancer yourself. And you mentioned that you've seen the ballet world, evolving throughout your career. So how have you seen it sort of opening up and becoming more inclusive of not only, disabled dancers in particular, like those with Parkinson's, but really all dancers from all backgrounds? And what progress do you hope to still see in the future?
Huge. I mean, when I was training, there was a very narrow opportunity line. If you didn't fit these certain criteria, there was really, not that there wasn't any hope. I think there was people, had somebody sat me down and said, look, Cecelia, there's these other companies where you don't have to dance on point. There's these other companies that are more flexible about, body shapes and stuff. They existed. I just think ballet students, particularly young ballet students, just weren't aware of them. And I don't think there was enough mentoring or coaching in that regard. And I do think ballet schools have really made an effort to improve that. And I hope they continue to make efforts to improve that. Because, for example, my family was not a ballet family. My parents didn't dance. Nobody in my family knew anything about ballet. So it was me to try and figure out how to navigate. I mean, my teacher was helpful, but when it came time for me to leave ballet school and really go out into the world and try to figure out what I was going to do with it, there wasn't a lot of mentoring. So I'm glad to see that that's happening. And I think there's room for a lot more of that, because I think that in and of itself will broaden opportunities for a lot of different people, because a good mentor will know enough about the landscape that they'll be able to see someone's certain talents or their weaknesses or whatever it is and try and guide them to certain places or at least make them aware of them. So I'm excited about that. There's so much around wellness, dancer, mental and physical wellness that is relatively new that I think is helpful. So like I said, I think it's evolving. I think it will continue to evolve. I was listening to our director talk at an event last night, and she said there was a time when the teacher just came into class and said, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. And that's how it was. And now the students will ask, why? Why do we have to? And so as a teacher, you need to be prepared to be able to explain the why, not just that's how we've always done it. You need to have enough understanding of pedagogy, I guess, to be able to do that kind of education. So it's becoming much more, I guess, sophisticated in some ways.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
No, yeah, it definitely does. It's so interesting to hear, that perspective from someone who's been in the industry for so long. And I love that, students are starting to ask those questions and teachers like you are answering them and, giving them some background about why they're doing what they're doing. And I know that you're an amazing instructor. The work that you're doing is incredible in the ballet community. So, if anyone wants to find more information about the classes that you teach or maybe, sign up, where can they get more info?
Well, San Francisco Ballet School website, there is an adult ballet segment, and there's a lot of information there. And you can, I think, sign up for classes. But I've made a real effort to reach out to students, and I don't have a huge online presence personally. But I do want people to have my email and to email me questions. I have people from all over the world. We have conversations about ballet. And sometimes they come to Zoom classes, and then we'll get together after the Zoom class and we'll talk about ballet. So it's a lot of fun. So if you'll let me give my email, I would love for people to reach out to me and say hi. Let me know what they're learning in class. It's Cecelia's Ballet Class at gmail.com. And I spell my name with 2 E's, Cecelias, ballet class at gmail.com.
Cecelia's Ballet Class at gmail.com. And we'll link to that in the show notes as well so people can easily find it. And yeah, anyone listening, definitely get in touch for more information. And we have one last section on the podcast. It's called Petit Allegro. It's just sort of fun questions if you're okay with that.
Sure.
I always like to start off asking, whether you're in a ballet class yourself or teaching, what's one item that you have to have in your ballet bag at every class?
Well, at every class, I bring 3 things because, when you're not dancing, you don't have to worry about point shoes. You don't have to bring all that stuff with you. But anyway, I have hair ties for my class, my students. I've got barrettes, so their hair isn't in their face. And I have Cecelia's ballet tips. I have this little handout that I hand out, particularly for, people show up. This is their first ballet class. They don't know, how to stand at the bar. They don't know how to go across the room. They don't know it's impolite to, stand in the front when they don't know the combination, So I try to give them a little written material so that they can learn some of the basics. So those are the 3 things I have with me at all times.
Oh my gosh, I love that, Cecelia's ballet tips. That's so important because a lot of times when adults come to class, especially if it's their first time taking a class, it can be so overwhelming. So to give them a little advice about how to handle class is great. And then I know you spent some time performing, especially when you were young. Do you have a favorite role or ballet that you have performed in your career?
What I think about my dancing, one of my favorite ballets was a ballet actually was done barefoot, which tells me something about my love, my difficult love for point shoes. It was to that beautiful Arana's guitar piece is beautiful, and it was called Sisters. It was done by a local choreographer. It's very dramatic. She gets stabbed. It was fun because I got to dance, freely with bare feet. I got to be dramatic. I got to die, all those fun things happened. And so when I think about a piece I really enjoyed doing, it was that. It was choreographed by a man named Dick Ford, who had a very, very, he was a painter. He was just a very artistic person, and he also choreographed.
Wow, that's amazing. That sounds like a very intensely emotional and beautiful ballet. So it sounds like a great experience to be a part of. And then I was curious if you could share a memorable or sort of a fun moment from one of your classes that stands out in your mind.
Well, I was trying to think about this, and we try to laugh. I think one of the things I do, and this I do this often. We're working. Everybody's like, it's like you forget that you're supposed to be enjoying this. You paid to come and learn, but also it's supposed to be a joyful experience. And so I'll just go up to people and say, isn't this the most fun you've ever had? Just to remind them that this should also be fun, because if it's not fun, they're not going to come back. And so I just try to remind people, and people get it. We laugh and we have a good time, but we're also very hardworking. So I tried to create a balance there. I can't really think of a specific moment that was particularly amusing, but I just love my students, and they're so full of life and laughter.
It's great to have that balance. It's good to laugh because we get so in the zone sometimes when we're in class. And what's the best piece of advice that you've received in your career?
I think it was to maybe just be available and ready when opportunities arise. Maybe I learned that from one of my teachers. Again, my generation did not get a lot of counseling and mentoring from their teachers. And so I was thinking about this question. I thought, I think that is something that we've gotten much better at. And my parents were supportive, but they didn't really know enough to be able to give me much specific advice. So I'll just speak for myself. I just had to figure it out on my own. And I didn't do the best job sometimes, but I did the best I could. And, I'm very happy with my ballet life and my ballet career. It wasn't traditional in a lot of ways, but it's been very satisfying. And particularly now at this time in life, for me to have so many classes, so many students, so much fun in the studio, it's a blessing.
It definitely sounds like a fulfilling career, and you've built an incredibly successful career. So figuring it out on your own has worked out, I would say. But then the last question I always ask people on the podcast is, in a perfect world, what would ballet look like, or what would you want it to be?
A perfect world. I guess one of the things that you have to admit is that this is an expensive career path for a young person. And, there's scholarships and there's things, but, just the opportunity. I mean, I grew up in a pretty blue collar neighborhood, and I remember being pretty special to be able to get to ballet class. My mom did work. She was able to drive me to ballet class, pay for the classes and buy the point shoes and all that stuff. So we have to do more. I was at an event last night. We've raised, I think, over $250,000 for scholarships at San Francisco Ballet School. But it's cost way more than that to train all the different dancers that come to the school. So I think really trying to figure out the economics of this as well, I think will go a long way in making it more open and accessible.
That's such a good point. And part of that is the work you're doing to, foster a love of ballet within the adult community, to bring, more audiences, more donors. And so I just think it's so incredible, the work that you're doing and everything that you're doing at San Francisco Ballet. So thank you so much again for agreeing to do this interview. It's been great to talk to you.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Elizabeth.
I loved what Cecelia said about improving financial access to ballet and some of the ways that adult ballet is helping with that through donations and expanding audiences. This was such an inspiring conversation, and I was really happy to connect with her. She was so kind to offer her email address for anyone listening who has any questions, wants to share what they're working on in ballet, or connect with her. I love our adult ballet community and how supportive it is. I'll put her email in the show notes so you can find it if you want to reach out, along with links for more info about Cecelia and the classes for adults at San Francisco Ballet. Thanks everyone for tuning into this episode, and I just want to remind you that the Adult Ballet Studio is nominated for the 19th Annual People's Choice Podcast Awards in the Arts category. These are listener-voted awards, and voting closes July 31st. If you have time and want to cast a vote to support this podcast, you can go to podcastawards.com/app/signup. I'll include a link in the show notes. Just sign up to vote and select the Adult Ballet Studio from the drop-down menu in the Arts category. Make sure to save your vote and confirm via email so that it counts. Thanks to everybody who's voted so far and for all of your support to help this podcast grow. We have another great guest coming up on Tuesday, August 6th, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, happy dancing, everybody, and see you at the bar.